Brooklyn Brewery, Brooklyn Pilsner.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. This is the Brooklyn Pilsner from the Brooklyn Brewery, which are based in, would you believe, New York. And they are this is brewed under licence from them by Carlsberg Marstons, the great Satan themselves. Hence the reason it's available around the corner. Now, I've tried some of the Brooklyn Lager before. I've actually reviewed it on the channel. Blimey, that would have been going back at least 3 years ago. And I've had it since in the Wetherspoons, and to be honest, I'm not really a fan of it. It's just got Carlsberg written all over it, to be honest, and it's one of them beers that it could be any beer. A typical macro brew. And, you know, the whole thing about... And this is what this is. This is brewed under licence. I'll get onto the ownership and stuff like that in a bit. But this is brewed under licence in the UK, and it's one of the brands that Carlsberg brew under licence in the UK. There's quite a few actually. Would you believe Warsteiner, or Warsteiner, I should say, how it's pronounced, is brewed under licence by Carlsberg. And to be honest, that doesn't taste too bad. So that blows my theory about every beer that Carlsberg brews being crap out of the water. But I don't really have high hopes for this because, as I say, I've tried the Brooklyn Lager and it ain't that great. Now, there was a really interesting article on the BBC website the other day, and they were interviewing the owner of the Budvar Brewery, and he was explaining that the beer that comes from Budvar is all made in the Czech Republic. It's actually, well, when I say he was the owner, he was the manager, and it's owned by the Czech government. But he was saying, and he made a very good point about the beers that are brewed on the licence, saying, yeah, they may be brewed to the same recipe, but he said that the original brewers are using locally sourced ingredients. And he also said that the equipment that is used in these breweries that brew these beers under licence, they're different. So his argument was, and he's a brewer, he knows his stuff, obviously. He's saying that this beer will never taste the same. And it's a good point, and I've always said that as well. Hence the reason why German beer that's brewed over here, I don't think it's ever going to taste the same, because you're not using the locally sourced ingredients. You'll be using British malt, British hop, well, not British hops, British grown hops. And as I always say, hops that are grown over here, they do have a unique character to them because they are grown in a maritime environment, and so is the malt as well. But you know, you can argue, and I will argue, and case in point being Stella Artois in Belgium doesn't taste too bad. I will say that, and I've had it on draft over there, and it's been nice, very nice, in fact. And I've had it over here, and it's been absolutely fucking terrible. I would imagine, I'm not saying I have any evidence to prove this, but I imagine that the Carlsberg that's brewed over in Denmark is slightly better than the Carlsberg that's brewed over here. I don't know. I'd love to test that theory, but I don't know how I'd do that. Maybe bring a bottle over from Denmark, or get someone to bring a bottle over from Denmark. Who knows? But there is a case to answer for when beer is brewed under licence and it claims to be exactly the same. I don't believe, and I have never believed, that it is the same if it's using locally sourced ingredients. And British brewers do make that point about using locally sourced ingredients because they say it's more environmentally friendly, which, to be honest, that is a good point. The British brewers do also make another point, saying that, yeah, these beers that are brewed under licence, they do create jobs for British workers, which, again, I'm not complaining about. So when I do go into my rants about macro brewed beer, they're, how can I put this? I'm doing so from a consumer point of view. I think you really should look at the big picture and, you know, take into consideration, well, yeah, if people are drinking that sort of stuff, then that's perfectly fine with me. That's their taste, that's their choice, it's their money. And it does create jobs for British workers, which I'm all for. However, one thing I will say, well, I'm saying it creates jobs for British workers, it creates jobs for the farmers, it creates jobs for the transport companies, and it also creates jobs for the actual brewers as well. So it's not a bad thing, in my opinion. However, it's a personal choice for me. I just don't like them beers, and I do believe that there are better beers out there for you to try. They may not be English beers, but they are good beers. Now, there was another, I'm not going to labour this point too much, but I just want to recap what I was saying in a lot of my videos about marketing and all that kind of thing. And somebody, I think it was some kind of psychologist, consumer psychologist or something like that, and he was basically saying that these exotic brands that come from Mexico, you know, like Sol and Corona, the Italian stuff like Birra Moretti and Peroni and stuff like that, it gives people a sense of the exotic, and that's his words, not mine, and it makes them think that they're drinking some kind of exotic beer, when the sad reality is they're drinking macro brewed beer that was brewed up in Northampton or South Wales or somewhere like that. It's purely just the labelling and the flim flam around the bottle that's making people think like this. Whether Brooklyn Pilsner is one of them beers, I don't know, but it's got the whole American thing going on about it. And to be fair, I mean, I was going to get back onto the ownership of this brewery. I don't want to labour this point too much, and I want to keep this review as short as possible because I know people get bored with my rambling. But these are actually based in New York, and I think at the moment they are still more or less independent. Now, the two owners who founded this brewery was founded in 1988, were a fellow called Steve Hindy and Tom Potter. Both of them started off, as many brewers do, as home brewers, and they eventually, quite an interesting story actually. They started up in New York, and one was worked in a bank, and the other one was a correspondent, a Middle East correspondent for the Associated Press. And eventually they just said, well, fuck this, let's make beer. And they did. And they've released a book on their journey to building their business. And it really is like I wouldn't say a rags to riches, but it's littered with tales of hard work, disappointment, upset. There's even a section in there where they had all their equipment stolen by the mafia, and they were held up at gunpoint and stuff like that. So yeah, crazy stuff. Not the kind of thing Brewdog would ever do. There you go. I digress. So as I say, they've given Carlsberg Marston the license to brew this over here in the UK. So this is what you're getting. You're not getting an authentic American beer. It's also brewed in Europe as well, and I think it's also brewed in Hong Kong too. Whether that's still the case under Chinese rule, I don't know. But it's certainly brewed in Europe. And here I am with a bottle of it. Now, is it in date? Because I've been getting a lot of beer from Skunk Central, and it's been out of date. And do you know what? There is no date on this. But there you go. Oh well. Oh, that's not the date there, is it? No, it's not. No. I'm talking shite as usual. One interesting thing about this lot is they have a stake, or had a stake, that's gone now, in the London Fields Brewery. Now, London Fields Brewery, if ever there was a brewery, a craft brewery with an interesting history, it's the London Fields Brewery. The owner, he was arrested for cocaine smuggling, got 12 years. So that just goes to show how much coke he was smuggling. But he got 12 years for that, and when he came out, he owed a lot of money to the government, and he was given permission to start up the London Fields Brewery, and he made a good fist of it. But unfortunately, he got done by the Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs for tax avoidance, and I think he's back inside now. The brand, the London Fields brand, was sold for $4 million to Carlsberg, Marston's, and the Brooklyn Brewery had a stake in that as well. Sadly, on I think it was December 2021, that was put up for sale. It wasn't a viable business, so I think it's up for sale at the moment for $4 million. Not sure whether they found a brewer. That was in 2021. I've not seen anything to the contrary, so I can't give you any information on that. But that is the spiel on the Brooklyn Brewery. Let's investigate what this beer actually is. Right, unfortunately there's no brew sheet on this, but it's I imagine it's the usual Carlsberg Marston's fare. It's a 660ml bottle. I'm always wary about beers that are brewed and put into 60ml bottles. There's just something about them 660ml bottles that I just don't like. It's a sign of a macro brewed beer, a bad macro brewed beer. I think it's the because the beer isn't of a great quality. I think they give you a lot of quantity of it. And who was it said? I think it was General Patton said, quantity has a quality, and quality has a quantity. And yeah, that does ring true with beer in my opinion. But again, that's just me. This is 4.6%, 660ml bottle. The ingredients are water, malted barley, hops. A beer brewed and bottled in the UK on behalf of the Brooklyn Brewery by Carlsberg Marston's Brewing Company PLC Limited, Wolverhampton. Blah blah blah. There's the usual thing. Carbohydrates, yeah, brewed in the UK. Drink responsibly. 3 UK units. What does that mean? Who the fuck knows? And that's about it, really. I haven't got high hopes for this, so let's just get this over with. See what it's all about. Right, as I say, if you want the Brooklyn Lager, then you can get that in most of the Wetherspoons pubs. There is, God, it don't smell good at all. That really does smell like, when I remember I said I was in East London the other day, there was a Carlsberg tap in this pub, and I remember having a sniff of the beer, and it really did smell like that. That's horrible macro nastiness of sulphur and sort of burnt hops, astringent tannins, that type of thing. This glass isn't really clean, but do you know what? With a beer like this, I really couldn't give a flying hairy one. Now, they say this is a Pilsner. It's very, very light. Can you see that? That is really light. And if you can see the bubble sticking to the side of the glass, then...
Oh dear, outside, never mind.
It really doesn't smell good. That smells cheap and grainy. And there is that tannin astringency to it, like burnt leaves. Doesn't smell good, unfortunately. It's very light. You could mistake that for Budweiser, in my opinion. Not looking forward to this at all, to be honest. I didn't have high hopes for it, but oh well. Wish me luck. Bottoms up. Well, very lemony. Lemony and grainy. Now they're saying it's a crisp lager. I hate that word, crisp. It doesn't... Crisp to me is like a white wine dryness. That's to me what crisp is. This isn't dry at all. If anything, it's the opposite. It's quite sweet. I can't get over that. Now, this is supposed to be a Pilsner. And I think what they've done is they've tried to, I don't know, get the hop bitterness by, well, I don't know how they've tried to do it, but it just has an astringency to it that isn't nice. And it's not like any hop that I can describe. It's like burnt leaves, if you can imagine that. And I have to say, I'm struggling. It's just bland and nondescript. There is a grainy aroma to it now, but it just lacks any type of character. There's a slight haze to it, I will say that, which is unusual, but it just tastes cheap, nasty, and bland, typical macro fare. Now, don't get me wrong, it does taste slightly better than some of the other stuff that come from these big macro brewers. Example being Carlin, that type of thing. The Carlsberg that I tried, the Heineken that I tried, it's so much better than them. But at the end of the day, it's the, I wouldn't say it's the best of a bad bunch, it's the slightly better of a really bad bunch, if you get my meaning. To be honest, these macro beers are more or less the same. I don't think they're brewed for flavour, to be honest. There's very little to distinguish between all these lagers. They've all got that wet cardboard type astringency, nasty aromas, grain, cheap grain, that type of thing. And yeah, I sometimes wonder why I do it. Am I looking for an outstanding macro beer? Well, to be honest, and I think this is the sad reality, I don't think I'm ever going to find one in the UK. When I say a macro brewed beer, I'm talking about lagers now. Other types or other styles of beer, yeah, there may be the odd diamond in the dog shit, but with these lagers, I mean, Warsteiner is one, I have to say, that Carlsberg is one of Carlsberg's brands, and the fact that it's available in every supermarket, I think is because it's brewed on the license over here. But this is, yeah, this actually smells a bit like Warsteiner. But I will say the Warsteiner has got a slightly more flavourful character to it than this. This is just, it's just boring. I won't chuck it down the sink. I'll probably finish that. So that'll give you an indication of what this beer is like. But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, this was nearly, I think it was Rennie Skunk Central, I think that was £2.30 or something a bottle. Can't remember the exact figure. You have to question, if they've got cans of Budvar around there, I'd much rather shell out for a can of Budvar, or even the Kozel stuff that they've got around there. This stuff just really doesn't do anything for me at all. And I have to say, if you're buying stuff in for Christmas and you want to get a reasonably good lager, I wouldn't go for this. If you're looking for something off the shelf, if you're in a supermarket, cans of Budvar, avoid the bottles unless they're completely covered, and maybe the Warsteiner Kronbacher if you can still get it. That kind of thing aren't bad when it comes to the macro brewed lagers, but yeah, I just don't think we can brew lager in this country, to be honest. That's my sort of take on everything at the moment. Slightly better than the really bad macro brewed beers, but there's nothing to really make this beer stand out at all. Not one iota. So what is the verdict on Brooklyn Pilsner? Well, my aversion to 660ml bottles is borne out yet again with this stuff. It's a macro brewed beer, brewed under licence in the UK. It's never really going to pull up any trees, is it? I will say it's slightly better in that it has got some nasties in it, but they're not as pronounced as the stuff you get in Budvar or Carlin or Carlsberg or Heineken or anything like that. But in the grand scheme of things, this just isn't a great beer. Doesn't really do much for me. It's got that cheap, grainy flavour to it. There's a slight astringency to it, which I'm assuming I don't know, could be wrong, but they're maybe trying to give it a bitterness that comes with Pilsners. I don't know what the fuck goes on in these macro brewers' minds, but this ain't for me. I would probably, well, I'm not saying I won't buy this again, there's nothing to really make me want to ever buy that beer again. And if you're out shopping, especially coming up Christmas, you're out shopping for beer and see this on the shelf, and there's other alternatives, as in the stuff I've mentioned, as I say, the Warsteiner, the Kronbecker. If you're in Morrison's and they've got Hofbrau, and you're in Tesco's and they've got Paulaner, just fucking go for that all day long. Avoid this. It's just not good beer. So there you go. I will give that. What would I give it? I'm going to give it no more than a 5, and I'm sort of contemplating whether I should give it a 5, but I'm not going to throw that down the sink. I'm going to actually drink that, and it will be the last time I ever drink Brooklyn Pilsner again, unless I'm in the USA, which I can't really see, to be honest. All the times I've been in the USA, it's all been paid for by my company, but them days are over, I think. In these austere times, I don't think they've got that sort of kind of money to send me over on training courses in the United States, unfortunately. But I had a good run. I had 3 trips over there. One to San Francisco, one to Chicago, and the other one to Washington, DC. Enjoyed them all. I think San Francisco was the best. Chicago was the worst. Fuck me, that place is like the fucking Wild West. Washington, DC wasn't bad, actually. Didn't mind it. Weather was a bit hit and miss, but yeah, it was nice. Yeah, this won't be drunk by me over here ever again. So I'm going to give it a 5 and no more. And the reason I'm giving it a 5, as I say, I'm going to drink it and that's it, no more. And remember, beer is working class champagne.